It's not a lot of you guys, but that's what I was kind of expecting. That's what you get when you propose Ansible talk to the PowerShell conference. Yay, me. The reason why I decided to go with this one is because that's pretty much what I'm doing right now at work. How many of you guys are working with VMware at your work? Awesome. Just one person. Great. But not sure how about you, but we historically had issues with describing our VMware infrastructure in any form. We tried with the host profiles, but that kind of covered part of the ground, and not necessarily all of it, and also maintaining that was just, let's put it gently, pain in the behind. What we decided to do is, okay, we are actually moving between data centers, so we decided, okay, we're going to build this new greenfield. So let's make sure that this time around we actually describe what we built, rather than just build it with mouse clicks and stuff like this. And because we were historically using DSC for our for our Windows infrastructure a lot, we decided, okay, let's look what's there that resembles PowerShell DSC for Windows. And that's how we landed with VMware DSC. But next to that, we were also deciding how we want to describe our storage. So big part of your VMware infrastructure, and I'm pretty sure that this is the case for anybody who's doing any VMware, is to make sure that you also have the backend storage described properly so that you can actually manage both of the things and make sure that they actually talk together and they understand each other. And we were looking in the, so historically we were using our Dell storage, and they have some APIs, and it kind of worked. We built some PowerShell tools around it. The problem was that whenever we were trying to build tooling for a specific type of storage, not even different vendor, but the different type, we would have to use different APIs, we would have to wrap them in our own functions, and just kind of like hide the fact that the Dell was doing terrible work at their, and what they're doing. So when we were building this new data center again, we decided, okay, let's just see if there are any other players on the market that can do better. And we did some POC, and eventually we landed with NetApp, which it also has some PowerShell support, but we figured out, okay, very early on that their Ansible support is way better than what they offer when it comes to describing your infrastructure as a code within PowerShell. There was no DSC for NetApp. There were definitely NetApp supported modules for Ansible. So because we decided, okay, we want to have this storage described in NetApp, it kind of made sense to describe part of our VMware infrastructure as well in Ansible, so that we can, within one Ansible playbook, we can describe both the backend and frontend, give or take. And that's how we ended up with this kind of mix. So, before we go into the actual technical details, I would like to say a few words. So thank you to our sponsors. That's the reason why we are here. That's the reason why we had a good launch, and why some of us probably are starting to nap already, is because of the Patch PC and Chocolatey. Thank you very much for our sponsors. A few words about me before we dive into the technical details as well. My name is Bartek Bielawski. I'm originally from Poland. I live and work in the Netherlands. I'm currently, I phrase myself as a PowerShell enthusiast. I used to be MVP, but that's no longer the case. I wrote a book. I believe that was the first book in Polish about PowerShell. This is something I was proud of, and it's definitely something I wanted to achieve, and I managed to. And agenda for today. So first I would like to explain a little bit detail. Yes, the picture is by my daughter, in case you didn't see any of my presentations before. All of the media that I usually use in my presentations, to avoid any licensing problems, I just ask my daughter to draw it for me. First I'm going to describe we're going to explain a few words why we decided with Ansible DSC. I kind of started on that already. And because I'm not really a PowerPoint person, I'm a PowerShell person, we'll move to demos soon after. So first I'm going to show you some of the VMware DSC demos, and then something about Ansible. Probably less interesting for the people that work with PowerShell, but my idea is that if you start your journey with PowerShell, eventually you'll start appreciating other languages as well, such as Python, Ansible, Terraform, you name it. And if you want to describe your infrastructure as a whole, sometimes you have to make those trade-offs. Maybe you don't use the tool that you're most comfortable with, but the tool that does the job, right? So despite the fact that I personally prefer to use PowerShell, it doesn't happen very often that, it does happen very often that I spend whole month at work not touching PowerShell at all, just writing Python for a month, just because, right? I will reserve some time for Q&A. I hope that I will make it on time. This is the first time I'm presenting this, so it might be that I will just go a little bit shaky on the timing, so bear with me. So, why? So, as I mentioned before, with this greenfield scenario, and also with the scenario when you already have VMware infrastructure in your organization, you want to start getting some control over that part of your infrastructure. It's kind of critical to have control about everything that you manage, because that means that whenever something changes, you can see the track of what happened, right? So that's what we definitely wanted to achieve in our organization, to make sure that not only our Windows guests are described in the DSC, but also the infrastructure that they run on is also described properly. And that's something that we didn't have, and obviously that gave us some kind of feeling of, okay, we are definitely not in full control of what we are managing, and we did want to change that. It also means that if you repeat something multiple times, let's say you want to add another cluster to your infrastructure, or you want to add a host to a cluster, you want to make sure that they are behaving and they are configured in similar fashion. They don't have to be configured the same, and most of the time you don't want to have them exactly the same. For example, IP addresses will definitely change, right? But some things have to be the same, and some things have to be within a sentence template. And that's where any kind of the infrastructure as code solution will help you. Two captains. I mentioned it here because obviously the idea of mixing DSC and Ansible, you kind of run into risk where DSC will describe something and Ansible will describe it the same thing but differently. On Windows we had similar problem with DSC and GPO, for example. Here we can have, if we use both DSC and Ansible, we can definitely run into issues when we are not careful and we don't draw the line, like consciously draw the line, which one is taking care of which part of the configuration of the host or of the data center of vCenter. So that's why we are actually doing that. I will move to demos. Unfortunately, my laptop is not able to sustain vCenter and few hosts. It's tiny, and it's also memory-wise, it's not that big. So I will just have one A6i host. So it's going to be very limited in scope of how much we can do here during the presentation. I also didn't want to rely on my infrastructure at home. Historically, if you go to conference and you rely on the Wi-Fi, you might find yourself in trouble. So I thought, okay, let's just make sure that even if the internet is cut off, I still can present everything that I wanted. So let's move on to my VMs. Let's make sure that they are up and running. So I'm going to start both of them. One is my demo Linux VM. The second one is the A6i host that we going to try to configure. And we're going to spend most of our time in this guy. So let's move on here. I'm first going to show you how VMware DSC works, and later I will show you how to install, because I thought, okay, if I tell you how to install something and you think, okay, it's great to know how to install it, but I'm not even sure I even care. I will try to first show you why would you care, and then explain how to install it properly. Because this is Linux, obviously the whole thing will run on PowerShell 7. You can still run VMware DSC on PowerShell 5, but then it will try to rely on DSC proper, and I would say that is a very bad idea. Why? Unless you are not describing your host with Windows DSC, then you are fine. But if you want to describe your host and then VMware DSC next to that, you might run into trouble because LCM is not a very good citizen. It doesn't like to run things in parallel. And basically, you might shoot yourself in the foot from the get-go. So what I would recommend is just go straight to PowerShell 7, just ignore the fact that LCM exists, just go with PowerShell DSC. Even if you are running on Windows, just go with the PowerShell DSC from Windows, so PowerShell 7. So that's what we're going to do. Obviously, here on Linux, it's not like I had any choice. I made it specifically so that I don't have this choice. So the way you operate with the VMware DSC on PowerShell 7 is that you have a special module, and I will show you later how to install it, with few commands. So first of all, you are able to create the configuration. So let's try this one. So what I'm trying to do here, I have my script where I have my configuration defined. I'm passing some parameters. In this case, I'm just passing the IP address, or in the proper node lab, not running on the lab test scenario, you probably would pass the host name of this. I don't have DNS running here, so I had to rely on the IP. And what happens now is that it generated object. This is one thing I definitely like about the VMware DSC compared to DSC proper, because DSC proper, what will happen when you generate configuration, you just get the MOV document, which is just text. And that means that you just can read this text and send it over to the host where you're trying to configure. In this case, we can manipulate this object. I will show you in a minute how to do that. But what happens next, if you are connected, let's just make sure that we are connected to our, to our E6i host. So now when I'm connected, I can just run test DSC configuration, and I can verify what is configured correctly, what it's not configured correctly. And that, as you can see, I'm passing this object that I generated first, right? And because it's object, I can modify that, which means that even if my script contains a lot of different items in the configuration, I can just trim it down to things that I actually care about at this particular moment in time, which might be useful when you really want to reconfigure just small tiny thing on all the hosts in your data center. You don't necessarily want to run all those things, all those tests against each one of them. I'm not sure why it takes so long. It should actually be done by now. Yeah, thank you. So as you can see, I did describe some things initially, and I did apply these changes. Some of them I just described later, and I didn't apply it yet, so there's something we can look at during this presentation. So let's just start it. Let's just make it so, right? That's the point. I don't want to see it. I want to make sure that my system is configured the way I want it. I could run it with verbose, and I can see the output. I'm not doing that for a reason. It's that because it's actually, it's a lot of information that we not necessarily want to see. But what should happen now is just that my NTP settings should be changed. It's something very often as VMware administrators we struggle with. We need to make sure that NTP is correctly configured. I enable SSH, so I can SSH to the host. Normally, I would not do that in production environment, but this is just my lab, so I can definitely do whatever I want. And a few other things are being changed. And I'm going to leave it like this for now. Any questions? If not, then we're just going to probably just take a look at how the actual configuration works. Looks like. Yes. No. Really? Yeah, as you can see, it's not very fast and responsive, so I'm pressing shortcuts that's supposed to do something. Yeah, we're going to get to VI later, just for fun. Okay, let's exit full screen because I do want to see the code. programming. There you go. So the structure of the actual configuration, because that's what I wanted to show you, is not that different from your regular configuration that you would have for your VM Windows infrastructure. Maybe it would actually be quicker if I just show it here, or like on my machine. I mean, maybe I gave too little juice to the other guy, and that's why he's struggling. All the code will be, by the way, later. I mean, it's already on the GitHub. I just have it in the private repo. I will just make it public so you can see all the things I'm doing here. So pretty much, you specify your parameters on your configuration. For whatever reason, the way the VMware DSC actually works, you need to repeat those parameters as well in your configuration body. Otherwise, they don't work. And then you just import the DSC resource, same as you would do in the actual DSC in the Windows realm. And if you are using this vSphere node, that makes it easier to connect to the actual host vCenter usually that you want to configure things on. And then you you don't have to pass on the server name and credentials every time. You just have it kind of embodied in this vSphere node part. And then you later just describe the elements. And the way we approach that in our organization is that we have some metadata that we will just pass on to this configuration, and then different hosts will be configured differently. Baseline we use for like making sure that the base is configured the same. So I'm looking at Gael, it's like PowerShells again. We never stop away from this concept. And we have a baseline, and next to that, we just configure individual hosts with their IPs and whatnot so that we can actually have like vMotion IP and management IP specified in our configuration per host, and that it makes easier for us to just make sure that all of them are configured almost the same, right? So they are the same to the point that we want them to be. Okay, now it started. I don't need you anymore. Yeah, for some reason it's super slow. It used to be a bit faster than that when I was testing it at home. Demo gods.
Check if you're on battery, if you make sure.
I think I'm not. I was testing that before. No. See, this one is still running. That's interesting. Okay, I'm just gonna kill it. I still want to show you a few things, and it's not that interesting at this moment. Fortunately, what I have found out is that sometimes when I freeze the VM, it just doesn't respond very well after I recover it. So let's just do the nasty thing that I probably should not do, and just do usual Windows stuff. Just turn it off and on again. What I wanted to show you next is that this object that we created, right, this baseline, I could take part of it and just do some simple where object, and with this I could just select the individual items that I wanted. And maybe it's better because then we have just small subset that actually will work, and then we can just push it to our A6i host.
Why would you do that and not reapply? Because if you change only one thing,
yeah,
it will only make that thing change.
Yes.
So why would you filter and just try to do one tiny thing if the other things should not change anyway because it's already good?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the question is, why would I even filter like this? And my answer to that is, it's not about how, it's not about being worried about things changing. It's more about if I'm going to touch like 200 hosts and I'm just going to change NTP settings, it's way quicker if I just say, okay, just change NTP settings and that's it, right? So overall, afterwards, I would still run tests to verify that everything is correct. But for the setting part, it just doesn't really add up too much value if I just try to set something that I would expect to be already in the good shape. Okay, so DSC demo. Let's connect again. Let's connect. Okay. Let's generate the baseline. And now I'm going to just do what I said. So once we have this object, I can actually show you how the object looks like, because that's another thing I wanted to share with you. So let's, no. So this baseline object has this property nodes, which will normally contain all the servers that you are connected to, or vCenter, and if you connect to vCenter. And under the nodes, we have resources, and those resources, we can see all the properties. So that's another thing that's way easier when you look at the MOF, you can kind of read it if you get used to it, but it's not really like made for humans to be read, right? This one, I run some code and I get some things injected into that, but I still can read it as a human being and see what's going on. And if I decide to just trim down the baseline with this filtering, baseline, that's nodes, that's resources, come on. This one. So here I'm I'm interested only in the power settings. So if I look at the baseline now, I removed everything else, and now if I go to nodes, resources, you can see there's just one resource there, VM host power policy, and then that one I can start VMW DSC configuration. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I need to have whole baseline, not just the resources. Sorry. And let that one run. So Ansible. I mentioned that we decided to do not just DSC because of the storage story. So So here, with Ansible, how many of you were working with Ansible before? Okay, so my approach to Ansible is, okay, it's easiest when you just create a virtual environment in Python, install Ansible in it, install all the resources that you need, and then just take it from there. And I try to follow the good practices from the community when it comes to structuring your Ansible repo. You normally, you have your roles, you have your playbooks, and you pretty much just under roles, you would put your different roles that you have, that you're going to use. And then under each role, you would just put the tasks or handlers. Handlers is actually pretty interesting thing that we don't have in DSC. So in the DSC world, when you want to like restore service, you don't really have that. The Ansible is way better in this regard because they actually have a concept where you can say, okay, if you do this, just tell this guy to restore it, and it will just work very happily with this. And we have additional vars where we just store information. In this case, as you can see, I stored out, which just contains information about my username and password for the VMware host. So I'm not going to show it to you. You will see it on the screen anyway. It's not like it's very useful because this machine is not connected to the internet, fortunately. But pretty much that's how we would structure that. And then because of the structure, when you actually try to do something with it, it's pretty simple because you just specify, I'm going to run it on localhost. That's the difference between Ansible normal and Ansible here, because you don't really change something on the local host, you're just changing something in the VMware infrastructure. And it's not like you are running Ansible on the VMware infrastructure. You will use your local host or the host that you are talking to as a proxy. And then use APIs pretty much to just modify the infrastructure on the other side. That's why gathering facts makes absolutely no sense here, because those facts will be from the host that you're running against, which is not the host that you're actually configuring with this one. And become false also, most of the things that we'll do in our real scenario is not like you need to be sudo root to do those things, because you're actually just calling API remotely. So authentication is important when you connect to the actual A6i host, not local. In my demo, I'm going to change it a little bit because I couldn't get NetApp virtual appliance to work on my laptop as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to create NFS exports on my local Linux machine, the one that we are using as a demo machine, and then just try to mount those NFS exports to A6i hosts, which makes I mean, that's not going to be very useful if you want to run VMs on it, because trust me, it's not the best setup ever. But for our case, it's definitely sufficient to show you how that thing would work. So the way you normally just operate with Ansible, you just run Ansible playbook. I'm going to skip the info. I'm going to go straight to storage. And if you are interested in what happens before you actually do any changes, another good thing about the Ansible is that it has this check option, which pretty much told you that you will see the username and password. But it shows you, okay, what I would do. So right now it's just echoing all the things that I have, but it shows like I'm changing those things, but it's not really changing anything at all because I told it to check. So it's just going to show you what would be changed if you would skip the minus check. And as you can see here, I already had this NFS1 and NFS2, NFS3 and 4 were not there yet. Where this NFS things are coming from? Well, we just show the variables files. So we have here, I have just the list of those the data stores that I want to have, and that information you can use. So in our real case, what we do is we say to NetApp, okay, create this volume, create this LUN. Then we connect it with fiber channel. But we want to also, on VMware side, we want to format those and name them same as the volumes and LUNs on the NetApp to make that easy connection between actual data store and the volume on the storage device. So it's easier to maintain it later. So that's pretty much what would happen in our case in the production environment. Here, because I'm doing that with this fake NFS exports, I'm just creating NFS exports on Linux first, and then I'm mounting them with the same name under Linux, under A6i. So let's just try the same without our check. Oh, come on. So let's remove the check. No. So now the theory is that it should create those hosts and those NFS exports, And for this NFS exports, obviously I'm going to use become, because I need to be a root to just modify this file, make sure the exports exist. But that's in normal circumstance, if you talk to NetApp and VMware, both don't really require you to be local root. You just need to have access to Ansible as an engine to talk to those APIs that exist on either NetApp or VMware. So if you look here, now we're supposed to have those data stores. So let's go back to this guy. Let's see how that one is doing. OK, this one is finished. So if I do get data store here, we are connected, so we can see that NFS 02 and 03 and 04 are there. What I forgot to do is show you earlier that they're not there yet, but you can trust me, they were not there yet. But what I mentioned earlier as well is this two captains on the one ship, right? So I have another playbook here, which I'm going to show you first. So remember, we had this power configuration on the other guy, right? So if I do something like this, you can see from the text here that I'm going to break something, right? So let's just break it right away, because why not? We are running out of time anyway, so we might as well. Yes, it's power. I'm not going to check you. I'm just going to run away, because I don't have much time left. So what it does now, it's the VMware DSC I specified. I want to have power configuration high performance. Historically, we had a situation where our VMware hosts were underperforming because all the vendors were told by EU that running the echo mode is so much better for servers than running in the full power mode, and our VMs were underperforming. So we decided, okay, let's just make sure that it's not the case. Here I'm actually doing the reverse. I'm turning it to actually be configured the way that I would probably not want to do it, to have it. So if I go back here, and I have my baseline already stripped down to this power configuration, right? So if I test VMware DSC configuration, mine is detailed. And mine's verbose because we just have one item, so it won't be a lot of text coming back. You can see that it's now checking, and it says, OK, current setting value is 3, doesn't match setting high performance. So it's not in desired state. So if you would have it in production environment, that one configures that with the, this echo mode, the other one with high performance, and they run simultaneously, you guess what would happen, right? It will just every day would you just be either this or that, depending which one run last, which is not what you want. So yes, you do want to fix it, and yes, you want to make sure that you keep control of what happens where. VMware DSC. And with that, you can make sure that if you draw the line and you are conscious about it, you can make sure that things that happen on VMware DSC don't happen on the Ansible, and vice versa, which means that in the end, you have control. You're using two different tools for that, which is not bad per se if you're just conscious about making those decisions properly. So if I go back to the Ansible playbook, and now I'm just going to check, it will probably tell me that it will try to change this again back to what it shouldn't be. I promise that I will tell you how to get that environment of as VMware DSC to run. Ansible is easy, right? You just install Ansible, then you Ansible Galaxy, install the VMware Community collection, and in the end, you just need to install. I think I had something as H. So you just create your virtual environment, you activate it, you install Ansible, then from Ansible Galaxy you install Community VMware. And the nice thing about Community VMware is that they have their requirements TXT file inside of it. So all the additional Python modules that are required to talk to VMware are described there. So you don't have to remember what you actually need. You can just run this pip install -r and then take it from there. When it comes to our friend VMware DSC, Actually, this one is just to run it. I think I didn't drop the other one. So first of all, you would need to install modules for PowerShell. You need to install PowerShell on your box. So that's given. Next thing you have to do, is learn how to type. Next thing you have to do is install PS desired state configuration module, which comes from gallery, and VMware PS desired state configuration. Sorry, it's been a long day. The first one is prerequisite to have invoke DSC resource running locally in PowerShell 7. The second one have all those new VMW DSC configuration, start, test, all those elements. But that's not sufficient because this desired state configuration is still considered experimental feature. So next thing you want to do, you want to enable PS desired state configuration invoke DSC resource experimental feature and restart your PowerShell, because that one only starts to work after you start the PowerShell session. And you have infrastructure to run DSC from VMware, but you still don't have resources. So you still need to install VMware DSC. VMware DSC. Okay. vSphere DSC, sorry, I always forget that they rename it recently. So there's VMware vSphere DSC that you also need to install, and that one contains all the resources to configure your data stores, your VMware host, your switches, all those things that you normally want to configure in your VMware infrastructure. And that's all I had prepared for today. I ran over time, so we have a little less time for questions. Go ahead, Adam.
Sorry, did you mention like PowerShell 7, yeah, to have all that? You're running on PowerShell 7 to do all that DSC?
Yeah.
So will the end clients also have to have PowerShell 7?
Sorry, the question is, would end clients need to have PowerShell 7? Not sure what you mean by end clients. So whenever you want to run those DSC resources against the VMware infrastructure, you would need to have PowerShell 7, assuming that you want to run it within PowerShell 7. So if you have a team, each member of the team would need to have the setup properly configured on their machine to enable to do that. So there's you can run it with PowerShell 5.1, but then you still run into this risk of like having all this additional LCM, and that's why we decided not to, and we decided to set it up manually. Yes, Gail?
Surely it's your pipeline server that runs the thing to your server.
Yeah, so the comment from Gael's was that pipeline server would do that. Eventually, yes. We haven't arrived there yet. And actually, my colleague, she's more a cloud engineer. She's building that on Linux right now. So she's building all the pipeline on Linux with PowerShell installed already. So she's also doing that for patching of the VMware hosts. We decided to do this as well on the Linux on the VMware DSC, which works pretty fine thus far. At least when I was leaving for vacation, it was still working fine. I hope that didn't change. So yes, we want to have a pipeline. We just didn't manage to build it properly yet. But yeah, historically we had the same with DSC. So initially we just had some kind of like script running somewhere, and eventually we managed to get it to the point where we were comfortable with just like in the middle of the day, just merging PRs and just getting things out there. With VMware DSC, we are not there yet. Okay, I just want to show you one more thing because I know there are some more questions. So I wanted to show you a little quirk about VMware DSC that I found really hilarious. So the way that VMware DSC actually works is that it will just parse your code and just generate classes based on that, which it does most of the time. It does it correctly, but not always. So let's see. So I have baseline broken, and I will try to create the same configuration using it, right? And when I try that, and that's what happens to me when I was doing that for myself, because when I was doing that at work, I was following the standards that were set up between me and my peers in the team. When it comes to certain things, I disagree with some of those, and I decided to do it my way, and this is what I got. And I was like, what's going on? Like, why this doesn't work? If I look at the code, let's go back to Windows, because it will be easier to see there. It doesn't look that much different from the other one. The only thing I changed is the casing of the keywords. So in my case, here, in the broken one, param and configuration are lowercase. I hate upper cases.
As it should be. That's the keyword. That's good. That's
Yeah. But then I was like, why it's broken? Why it doesn't work? So I started investigating, because yes, that's what I do. And I figured out, oh, I pressed the wrong combination. Yes, bravo. Okay, we can do it here, I guess. No, because I don't have it in my history. But, okay, bear with me. We still have like 3 minutes before we have to close down. So it should boot before we are done. So the problem is that the way they analyze the code is they took into account, okay, we have this script block with the keyword configuration in front of it, the name of the configuration, and then the script block, right? So what they did, they somehow managed to AST that part as a whole out, and then they thought, wow, we have extend, which is a string, which is perfect, because then we can just, we can cut the configuration keyword, we can remove the name of the configuration, and we just get a script block back, right? Well, I'm going to show you in a moment why that idea idea in itself is not that bad, but the way they implemented it is bad, is really bad. So, DSC demo. Let's let the PowerShell start. And so I believe it was, did I SLS it? Or did I grab it? Okay, so, nope. So that's the way they do that. See, they decided trim start is the best way to cut strings from PowerShell. See that? And then they trim start just to make sure that they remove additional spaces. For any of you that work with PowerShell longer than a few months, you might know already why it's not the greatest idea ever. So I thought, okay, let's see what happens if I do this. As you can see, I just completely swapped the order and removed some characters. Still works. Why? Because trim start doesn't remove the strings. It removes characters. And this thing is being converted into array of characters. So if I have my capital C, it will remove it. If I have lowercase c, not so much. So if I try the same with what they did, okay, that one worked. Yes. So now I'm doing my lowercase configuration, as Gail mentioned, the way it should be. And now it's not touched at all. Why? Well, because, again, they say, OK, remove capital C if you find it, and then all of those additional characters. But if the first character is not capital C, just lowercase c, it's not going to work, right? It's just going to completely ignore everything else because the first character doesn't belong to the array of characters that we want to remove. Therefore, there's nothing to trim. Ta-da! So be careful with this one. Just drop your standards if you want to work with it. I have a PR to fix that, which still uses trim start. I just added lowercase c there just to make sure that they both being removed. Because if I would just do here, like add lowercase c somewhere, it doesn't matter where, it just works, right? Because again, it's just our array of characters. But you don't want to make it case sensitive. Come on, it's PowerShell. It shouldn't be case sensitive unless it really is, like when you work with XML. But then it's justified because XML is just, yeah, not really cooperating. So that's all I have prepared for today. Sorry for a little rough demo part in the middle. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you got something from it. I will just make those both repos public. If you have any questions, you can find me on Twitter at Bielawski, and you can attack me anywhere else. Any social media is fine. And thank you for joining.